Good evening. On the air, the program time with an overview of the basic events of the day. Today, after tallying 40% of the voting ballots, only 4 parties and blocs, the Communist Party, the Russian Federation, the LDPR, Our Home is Russia, and Yabloko, have confidently surpassed the 5% barrier in the elections from the general federal list. In the one-mandate districts, already 115 winners of the 225 are known. In the Far East, the crash site of the Tu-154 airliner was located. The advanced detachment of Russian peacekeepers has left for Bosnia today. The mysterious depiction of Jesus Christ found in the mountains in the west of Australia could be a fake, local newspapers warn. And now about these and other events in more detail. 2 hours ago, the Central Election Commission announced the last data as of today on the results of the elections for the State Duma. It must be said that during the day, the picture didn't change very much after tallying 40% of the voting ballots. As previously, very confidently entering the Duma are only 4 parties and blocs, the CPRF, the LDPR, Our Home is Russia, and Yabloko. At 1900 hours Moscow time, the Central Election Commission held a press conference where it announced results that were received at that hour, drawing attention of those present to the fact that these are only preliminary data, because by law 3 days are given to the territorial commissions, 7 days to the district commissions, and only then, not later than after 3 weeks, the Central Election Commission should announce the final results. I'm prepared to give you those figures which we have at this moment on the federal district. Our Home is Russia, 9.6%. The Communist Party, the Russian Federation, has 21.9%. The LDPR has 11.1%. And Yabloko has 8.4%. Approaching the 5% requirement line are the Movement Women of Russia with 4.5%. Further, the Congress of Russian Communities. The Congress of Russian Communities, we have 4.3%. The Democratic Choice of Russia, the Unified Democrats, have 4.8%. And further down the line, we have the Agrarian Party of Russia with 3%. And 4.2% for the Communists of the USSR. And also 4.1% for the Party of Self-Rule of the Workers. The representatives of the Central Election Commission showed to the journalists the maps which give a visual idea of how the voting was conducted in various regions of the country. And so bright blue indicates those regions where particularly active were supporters of Our Home is Russia. Red designates the regions, including Kuzbas and Chernozemir, where greater support went to the communists. The pervasive green indicates the fact that almost in all regions were voters for the unification Yabloko. The Prime Minister and leader of the social political movement, Our Home is Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, is satisfied with the results of the Our Home is Russia at the parliamentary elections. He stated it this evening to the press in Moscow. In the opinion of the head of the Cabinet of Ministers, his movement, which gained about 10% of the vote through the country, achieved an adequate result despite the fact that it was in an extremely unfavorable situation, under fire of criticism from political opponents. In our situation, the votes that we have received are truly not a bad result, feels Viktor Chernomyrdin. Our personal correspondents on location continue to inform us about how the elections were conducted in various regions of Russia. Tens of observers from Russian parties and movements and from abroad convened in Omsk, a city of 1 million with a solid defense, oil chemistry industries and extensive contacts abroad. Preliminary polls indicate that half of that Siberian territory knew in advance for whom to vote. The other half decided on the 17th. As of today, it's only known that in Omsk, they're satisfied with the previous ruling body. The mayor and the governor of the district were re-elected. Our correspondent in Volgograd was present at the tallying of votes at one of the polling stations of the city, but in the District Election Commission, they presume that such distribution will be characteristic for all of Volgograd. The majority supported the Communist parties. The Communist Party, the second and third places went to the LDPR, Our Home is Russia, and in fourth position is Yabloko. In Petersburg, Voronezh, Voronezh, they didn't expect such an active turnout, and during the course of the day, to the polling stations, urgently additional ballots had to be delivered. Voronezh is that region where the Women of Russia received as much support as the Our Home is Russia, and by one-mandate districts, Chernozemia singled out two leaders. The new one, Ivan Rybkin for Voronezh, the former one, Nikolai Ryzhkov from Belgorod. On the backdrop of general civil activity, Sevastopol still stood out. Attending the polls was 95% of the electorate. They were mostly military people and voted for the military. 23% for the unification for the homeland. The leader and commander of the fleet, Edward Baltin. 13% went to the Congress of Russian Communities. Finally, the Nizhegorod district, where also, apart from deputies of the Duma, local government was elected. Maybe that's why the voters weren't impeded by the flu or the weather. With the region, it's clear that a convincing victory was held by Boris Nemtsov and Ivan Skler. With the Duma, it's more complicated. Preliminary results show that following Zyuganov's communists and the LDPR, the 5% barrier in the district was overcome by the Our Home is Russia, Women of Russia, and Yabloko. We, for now, have not yet received more precise data. Kira Grigorieva, Public Russian Television. Today in Moscow, leaders of many political parties and electoral amalgamations made their own commentaries of the first results of election. The preliminary results of the elections completely coincide with predictions and expectations of the communists, said the leader of the CPRF, Gennady Zyuganov. Zyuganov expects an addition of votes to his party through one-mandate districts. The leader of the Communist Party is very worried about his potential allies, the Women of Russia and the Agrarian Party, and hopes that they will manage to surpass the 5% barrier. Incidentally, if the agrarians don't win, there's no one to blame except for the potential allies of Zyuganov. According to the representatives of the APR, competitors, mostly communists, pulled away part of the agrarian electorate. Hope dies last, but even if the party doesn't get elected to parliament, no one intends to give up. Refusing to fight on would be a great tragedy for the peasants, said Mikhail Lapshin. Nothing tragic is seen in the preliminary results of the elections by one of the leaders of Yabloko, Vladimir Lukyan. According to him, given the current distribution, when the hypothetically the forces of the communists and Democrats are equivalent, the new Duma's ability to work will depend where the deputies from one-mandate districts will lean. Such a one-mandate deputy, and not a leader of a movement, Irina Hakamada reached the finish line. She feels that the scenario which is developing is the worst possible. In her opinion, the new blocs will focus only on the next presidential elections, and the professional work of the Duma will be suspended in mid-air. Today, our correspondents asked representatives of several blocs one question: whom do you see as your allies in the future Duma? We expect mostly to find understanding from democratic factions. Everyone who wants to cooperate with us, in this case, are our allies. All people who are not bereft of common sense and who are prepared to work together towards stabilizing the situation and improving the life of all of the citizens. We never entered a bloc. We consolidated our efforts in the State Duma with those parties and with those deputy groups who supported us on separate issues. According to preliminary results, many influential parliamentarians and leaders of electoral blocs who didn't exceed the 5% barrier are still winning in one-mandate districts. According to the Central Election Commission, in 115 one-mandate electoral districts of the 225, the winners are already known. Among them, the Speaker of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin, deputies Boris Fedorov, Sergei Baburin, member of the Federative Council, Nikolai Gonchar, Andrei Kozyrev, Sergei Shahrai, Yekaterina Lachova, Konstantin Borovoy, Sviatoslav Fedorov, Stanislav Gavaruhin, and others. International observers today in the State Duma held a conclusive press conference where they gave their assessment of yesterday's course of the voting. If one considers the fact that usually the Parliamentary Assembly, the OSCE, sends its delegation to the zones of tension and crisis, it's logical to presume that the current elections in Russia were viewed from the West as something dangerous for human rights and democracy overall. However, as is witnessed by the head of the delegation, Sir Peter Emery, 140 of his observers working in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Nizhny Novgorod, Voronezh, Novosibirsk, Smolensk, and Tver, painted a very favorable general picture, despite certain mistakes which were made basically of an organizational nature, such as delays in vote counting, or problems which emerged in certain areas with accreditation which were subsequently resolved. Current elections, compared to the elections of '93, were an obvious step forward, which permits one to view them, Sir Emery emphasized, as honest, free and just. Such is the prime conclusion which will be included in the special report to the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE. It's understandable at the press conference the topic of elections in Chechnya was raised, but guests didn't comment under the pretext that this republic was not within their zone of activity. The atmosphere of non-contentiousness and optimism which prevailed at the press conference permits the hope that in the near future, Russia, which has passed through the test of the Euro democracy indicator, will be entrusted to follow who is elected in Europe and how. The rate of the dollar did not react in any way to the results of the elections of the Duma and remained at its previous level today, 4,632 rubles for $1 American. More than 90% of the citizens of Chechnya who have the right to vote supported the head of the republic, Dokuzovgaev, at the elections. This was stated in an interview to Intervox by the chairman of the Election Commission of Chechnya, Abdul Karim Arsakhanov. Two topics particularly worry the public of Chechnya and the journalists: the final results of the elections and the situation in Gudermes. The fact is that the elections, for security reasons, were extended over a 3-day period. However, it turned out to be extremely difficult to remove the actual ballot boxes from regions to transport to Grozny. Certain regions are blockaded. Gunmen are shooting at anything that moves. The Associated Press vehicle was also shot at. All day today, members of the Election Commission transported ballot boxes by helicopter, and yet, as the chairman of the Central Election Commission, Abdul Karim Arsakhanov, stated, for now final results have been tallied only for 3 rural areas, the towns of Argun and Grozny. But even with these figures, it turns out that through the Republic, 52% of the electorate voted, 80% of them for Dokuzovgaev. It's interesting that the voters voted from Chatoy, Vidino, and even Gudermes, but naturally as far as they could from their places of residence. Today in Gudermes, the situation remained tense. Gunmen are commanded by the field commanders Radoyev, Abdukhalikov, and Galiskhanov. All of them are Dudayev supporters. Today, the elders of Gudermes asked them to leave the city. However, the Dudayev forces promised to shoot all of them if they come even once more to the voting, posing as peaceful citizens. Unlawful armed formations continue shooting at commandant's offices, the special designation militia regiments, and the railway terminal. There are casualties and wounded. Provocations against federal forces continue in other regions of Chechnya as well. Near the village of Girzel, Novogrosnitsky area, a convoy of Russian combat technology was shot at. All responsibility for this provocation lies on Dudayev and his closest circle. We have sufficient forces so that, if necessary, we may, in a most severe way, punish these armed provocators and force them to cease their combat activities. Near Gudermes and Chatoy, today, the army operation was launched to squeeze out the Dudayev formations. Preceded it were unsuccessful attempts at negotiations. 3 days, internal forces helped the population to evacuate those towns. During those 3 days, despite the heightened activity of the adversary and casualties among military population and military personnel, Ministry of Internal Affairs, federal forces deployed only firearms. Now, aviation and artillery were engaged. While this report was being prepared, a new convoy of federal forces and subdivisions of the Ministry of Internal Affairs formed and were moving toward Urus-Martan. Today in the Khabarovsk Rim area, the wreckage was found of the Tu-154 plane, which vanished the 7th of December. Our correspondent Leonid Stroikov reported by telephone from Khabarovsk. This afternoon, Khabarovsk time, midday this afternoon, Khabarovsk time, one of the search helicopters found the site of the crash of the Tu-154 plane, which had vanished with passengers and crew on board on the 7th of December. The funnel of the explosion was found in certain parts of the airplane. At the site of the Tu-154 wreckage, a rescue team landed, which during the course of the night must prepare a helicopter landing platform for the arrival of experts and members of a government commission. The site of the crash is in a mountainous area which is difficult to access, the detailed search of which previously was prevented by meteorological conditions. This is approximately 280 kilometers east of Khabarovsk, along the flight path of the vanished plane. The State Commission which is headed by the head of the administration of the Khabarovsk Rim area, Viktor Ashaev, today held a press conference where it spoke of the detailed plan of rescue work for tomorrow. In the morning, the 19th of December, just as soon as dawn breaks, from Khabarovsk to the crash site, a helicopter will depart with experts, rescuers of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, a coordinating team, and the members of the Government Commission. The Commission, however, has no hope of finding survivors, according to its members, because the airplane was flying at an elevation of 10,000 meters. The main objection today is to find the so-called black boxes of the crashed Tu-154. Leonid Strogo from Khabarovsk for Public Russian Television. Movement of the rescue search teams to the site of the 3 Su-27 planes which crashed in the mountains of central Vietnam is complicated by torrential rain and jungles. Details in the commentary of our correspondent. From various directions, forging through to the site of the accident of the military planes Su-27s are the search teams. They are 3, each consisting of 10 people. The path of the rescuers is indicated by local guides. The movement of the groups is impeded by dense fog and ceaseless tropical torrential rain. During the war in Vietnam, American soldiers during one day in the jungle could cover an average of 1.5 kilometers, the Vietnamese up to 4, but that's along flat terrain. In mountainous terrain, and the 3 planes which crashed are at an elevation of approximately 446 meters above sea level. This indicator was cut in half. Now, Russian and Vietnamese rescuers are resting. They're separated from the accident site by less than 3 kilometers. At dawn, the movement of the search teams will resume. And furthermore, today, through the channels of Viturtas, information was reported that ostensibly one of the pilots was already found. However, in the general headquarters of the Air Force, it was categorically stated to us that such a report is completely false. Alexander Onosovsky, Public Russian Television. The representative of the press service of the Air Force of Russia today told Interfox that by evening of tomorrow the search teams will reach the site of the air catastrophe. The President, Boris Yeltsin, and the Chairman of the Federative Council, Vladimir Shumeka, discussed today questions connected with the legislative activities of the Upper Chamber of Parliament for the period until the formation of the new Federative Council and the beginning of the term of the State Duma. Vladimir Shumeka acquainted the President with the agenda of tomorrow's session of the Federative Council. For the remainder of December and January, Shumeka said, the Federative Council must adopt an enormous number of legislative acts which have already been submitted or will still be submitted from the Duma. The aide of the President of Russia on economic issues, Alexander Lifshitz, does not feel that the new structure of the State Duma has radically worsened from the point of view of economic reforms compared to the previous one. In an interview to Interfox, Alexander Lifshitz stated that even the final tallying of the results of the vote does not yet provide grounds to discuss the relations of the new Duma toward economic reform conducted in the country. Lifshitz is convinced that the Duma's work initially will be greatly influenced by the inertia of pre-election promises. The newly elected deputies, he said, will have to attempt to fulfill those promises that they've made, even if they have been unrealistic, and time is required prior to the deputies understanding that certain promises cannot be kept. During these days, the timber forestry sector of the town of Bratska turns 30 years of age. This is Russia's largest company of such a type. 1 week ago, the former Bratsky stockade celebrated its 40th anniversary of receiving the status of a city, and today, the 30th anniversary of their company is celebrated by the forestry workers. If there's a celebration, people are enjoying themselves, life is better. When the processing companies of Bratska last year voluntarily united into a holding company, this helped to conduct mutual accountings and increase turnover funds. The increase of industrial productivity for the year was 15%. For me, there's no great difference. It's the same as now as it was before. Is it better in the stores, however? Of course, naturally, it's better. You can't even compare. Now there are so many goods, so many beautiful goods and delicious things, but not everyone can afford them. All that doesn't depend on how we work, but it depends on what we're working on. Equipment at the industrial complex is foreign, but its replacement is far overdue. According to Nikolai Yakovlev, general director of the Bratsky industrial complex, money for modernization could be generated after offering to the public the state package of shares at attracting foreign firms. However, the management of the state company, Roslesprom, or Russian timber industry, proposes that the government ratified a program last month for the development of the forest timber industry be implemented. We came from a meeting with the Russian forestry industry company, and we understand that there is money. Now we are dealing with objectives of state importance, using the conversion program to set up manufacturing of domestic equipment. Some stability is beginning to appear, of course. And if something new appears, that means it's got to be for the best. Today, the people of Siberia do not any longer survive, but live. They live and they want stability. Igor Dyamin, Alexander Saev, Public Russian Television, from the banks of the Angara. When this carpentry shop, headed by Alexander Artyukhov, rebuilt from scratch the old school in the village of Voskresensky and furnished it with decorations and magnificence on the interior, then even the most staunch skeptics began to believe, yes, there are still people who can teach people trade. Here, the problem is not just in organizing the training of the rural children and their free time as well. Agricultural yield is on the decline. Here, in Voskresensky, the fire brigade had to be relieved because of chronic shortage of funds. But a youth who has handyman's carpentry axe are able to produce such useful items after school, will he run to do nothing on the labor market? Of course, given the current meager budget, to build 14 trade homes for the Ivanova residents was not easy, but considering the natural ability, there was much economizing done, and all expenses to equip this handicraft trade home did not exceed 30 million rubles. And when this business finally begins to develop properly, and there are many examples of that, rural, able-bodied people will learn to feed themselves. Such trade homes in the Ivanovsk district will be built everywhere, where traditions still of people's natural ability are preserved. And at the District Arts Academy, they're training instructors and personnel for them. And in city and regional schools of arts, currently departments of folk trade are being established. That is, they're not speaking any longer of saving the handicraft trade per se, but elevating it to the level of art, as the Ivanovsk masters were always famous for. Sergei Yedoshkin, Yuri Apelyan's Public Russian Television. Diplomatic representatives of 32 countries of the world, including Russia and also NATO, the UN, the European Union and OSCE, discussed today in the suburbs of Bonn, in the state residence of Petersburg, at the International Conference on Former Yugoslavia for the first time, created on the initiative of the FRG, a broad spectrum of problems of peaceful regularization in the Balkans, and again for the first time participating in this roundtable discussion were all the warring sides of Bosnia. Confirming the intention to strictly adhere to the decision of the new structure, the Council of Realizing the Peace Agreement, participants of the Petersburg Conference devoted the majority of time today to civilian aspects of that document, and mostly measures of trust, disarmament, and separation of the warring sides on the principles of voluntarily accepted obligations, equal safety, and considering all external factors influencing the military-political situation in the region. In the opinion of the head of the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Klaus Kinkel, the objective of achieving peace is realistic and attainable, while simultaneously resolving problems of refugees, displaced persons, and holding free elections under the aegis of the OSCE. The Bonn politicians feel it's extremely important that Russia be involved in the peace processes in the Balkans, which subsequently could be another chance to establish new qualitative relations between Moscow and NATO. The Federal Chancellor Kohl, in this connection, emphasizes that such a scenario brings Europe closer to creating a common structures of security for the continent. Pavel Gorodnikov, Leonid Sokolnikov, Public Russian Television, Bonn. Today in Belgrade, on a special flight, 12 Russian officers arrived, the first representatives of our army from the international contingent implementing the peace agreement. According to the deputy commander of the Air Landing Division on Peacekeeping Operations, General Nikolai Staskov, the group of communications, rear, and engineering services officers are heading to Bosnia to re-specify the tasks of before the arrival of the advanced regiment of the Russian contingent. In the end of January, their arrival is expected. General Stiskov feels the main mission of the 1st Russian Regiment is to define and prepare the position locations and establish interaction with the 1st Armored Tank Brigade of the United States. The group of officers tomorrow will visit the airport in the Muslim city of Tuzla and the sadly renowned Serb town of Brčko, where 1,500 Russian landing troops will carry out their peacekeeping mission. The arrival of the basic contingent of the forces implementing the peace agreement and transfer of authority to them by the Blue Helmets is being delayed, as was announced, because of bad weather and because of bureaucracy. The Balkans are the Balkans. Nonetheless, by the new year, according to the plan, the front lines in Bosnia should vanish. Vladimir Solovyov, Anatoly Klem, Yugoslavia. Today in Seoul, the trial of the former president of South Korea, Roh began. He's accused of having received bribes to the tune of $370 million from leading representatives of South Korean business circles. Being tried in this case together with Roh are 14 former government officials and businessmen. They're indicted for the illegal transfer of monies to the ex-president for his protection of businessmen. In the court, Roh generally admitted to the majority of charges laid against him. An interesting discovery was made by a leading employee of the Petersburg Cabinet of Curiosities, Irina Fyodorova. After 30 years of work, she managed to decipher the texts on tablets passed on 109 years ago by the traveler-explorer Mikluch Macau to the Academy of Sciences. As reported by the agency Arguments and Facts News, inscribed by residents of Easter Island, series of human figures, fish, reptiles, and octopi apparently represent excerpts from songs and chants which were sung during the harvest and sowing seasons. Not only did the ancient residents of Easter Island leave enigmatic inscriptions, an unusual event occurred recently in Australia. The mysterious appearance of the face of Christ in the mountains in the west of Australia is acquiring a legendary scale. The local 42-year-old businessman, Julian Webb, asserts that while taking a walk in the evening with his 20-year-old son through his property, unexpectedly he heard the voice of God. This continued over the course of 2 evenings. On the third one, on the same place, before them, a pillar of light appeared, falling on a granite rock. According to him, when the smoke dispersed on the 40-kilogram rock piece of granite, a depiction of a man appeared resembling the face of Christ. According to Webb, this rock has a certain effect on people. His young friend, who is inflicted with arthritis, having visited this site, suddenly felt much better. And if this continues to develop as it has been, then this rock could become yet another wonder of the world or a pilgrimage site for the afflicted. However, there is an opposite opinion. Local skeptics feel that the appearance of the face is nothing more than a falsification because it looks like a computer-generated depiction of Christ, which was recently exhibited at an art gallery. Probably the more precise answer to the mysterious appearance of the face of Christ may be provided by scientists conducting several scientific studies of the magic rock. And yet the face of Christ appeared in Australia, evidently not by coincidence, because before Christmas, for which preparations are actively underway in the Catholic world, exactly 1 week remains. Madrid has its unique December characteristics: a Christmas tree at the Gate of the Sun and lineups for Europe's oldest lottery. For some reason, local residents feel that here the luckiest tickets are sold. On an average, a Madrid resident spends for Christmas around $80 for this pastime. People have long ago been gripped by the festive feeling. They grumble at the crisis and prices, but still beseech the shelves, particularly for delicacies for the Christmas dinner, gifts and gifts for children. Casting a master's eye on his domain is the capital mayor, Alvaro Salaman's son. During this week, he has to do everything and be everywhere. Open the Christmas marketplace, listen to Christmas carols, and try the traditional hot chocolate and pastry. Refreshments are free from the city treasury. Some feel that such a festive ostentatiousness is part of the election campaign of the Conservative National Party, which evidently will come to power in the country in the spring of next year. However, the mayor asserts that this is only the faithfulness to national traditions. So no one would probably be offended by the municipality for such expenses, but to ignore markets, concerts, and giving out sweets, I would be accused of indifference and forgetting tradition. In Spain, Christmas is coming, the most favorite celebration of the year. Public Russian television. From Madrid, Igor Kudrin, Valery Ivanov. In a few moments, the program will be continued by Vladimir Topilsky with the sports news. With this, I bid you farewell and again briefly remind you about the basic events of the day. Today, after the tallying of 40% of the voting ballots, only 4 parties and blocs, the Communist Party of Russia, the LDPR, Our Home is Russia, and Yabloko, have confidently surpassed the 5% barrier in the elections by the General Federalist. In the one-mandate districts, already 115 winners of the 225 are known. In the Far East, the site of the crash of the Tu-154 airliner was found. The advance group of Russian peacekeepers today left for Bosnia. And the mysterious depiction of Jesus Christ was found in the mountains of Western Australia could be a forgery, local newspapers warn. On Channel 1, the overview of the sports news from the world of sports. Good evening. The elections of the State Duma and the summarizing of the results of the national vote have moved into the shadows the sports events of Sunday. Briefly about the main ones. In Birmingham, the drawing was held for participants in the European Soccer Championship. Rivals for the Russians will be the teams of Germany, Italy and the Czech Republic. The matches will be held on the fields of Manchester and Liverpool. The World Handball Championship has ended. Suffering defeat in the match for the 5th place, our team could not win a pass to the Olympic Games in Atlanta, and the champions are the South Korean team. The golden harvest of Russian skiers at the World Championship slopes in Italy. Nina Gavrilyuk, Larisa Lazutina, Lyubov Yegorova, Yelena Velba beat the rivals in the 4x5-kilometer relay. Finally, success has been enjoyed by the men's biathlonist team. On the ski slopes in the relay, shooting and racing were excellently combined by Viktor Maiganov, Vladimir Dachov, Sergei Tarasov and Sergei Rashkov. At the Izvestia tournament, hockey players of the Russian team beat their competitors from the Czech Republic 6-2. That's the first victory for our team for this year, trained by Vladimir Silvey. Today, the Izvestia tournament, which named recently the Lesser World Championship, reached its equator. All teams played 2 matches apiece of the 4 regulation matches planned. In Sweden and the Czech Republic, in the event of victory, the Scandinavians would be the sole leaders of the championship. However, the spurt for first place was not successful. The young, vain Czech team, after demolishing the Russian team, was very aggressive, and in the first period, the Czechs 2 times reached success. Further, the game did not change, not decreasing tempos. The Czech players methodically strung the defense of their rivals, and Trachis loses 1-5. After 2 rounds, the top tournament chart has a hierarchy, 3 points each for Canada and Russia. One wants to believe that the Russians, having found their game niche, will not lose it to the end of the tournament. Tomorrow in the Ice Sports Palace of CSKA, there are 2 matches, Canada, Sweden, and Finland, Russia. And now about soccer. We begin our video mosaic with an overview of the games of the national championships of Europe and South America. Brazil has new champion, Botafogo, beating Santos in 2 matches. In the repeat match, a 1-1 tie was achieved. The new champions must put their hopes in the best bombardier, Tulio, who opened the score. As in the first match, the goal of the forward was decisive. Santos could have scored a respond goal, which wouldn't have brought the favorite Pele club to the championship medals. Leaders of the Italian championship, Milan host Turin. In the 5th minute, the hosts violated a rule in their own penalty zone, and Rezzatelli opens a score from penalty. The happiness was short-lived. Only 6 minutes after a corner goal, brilliantly executed by Roberto Boccio, equilibrium is established. Milan has 29 points. Fiorentino is 1 point behind. The Spanish championship was the last round was the benefit of Valeri Carpin. His Real ties Salamanca 3-3. The ex-Spartak player scores 2 times. Another Real, Madrid, took the victory from Celta. The only goal near the corner was executed by the most active player of the Madrid team, Alvaro Benito. The Australian Emma George began her track and field career in the broad jump sector. Now her interests have changed, and George is pole vaulting successfully. During the last months, for the 2nd time, she has improved the world record. In Perth, the record holder jumped 4 meters, 28 centimeters. To achieve success in the conservative Japanese sumo wrestling for a foreigner is not easy, but victory is very desirable. This black American sumo wrestler gained a key in the victory through his enormous body weight compared to the champion. The rivals looked like featherweights. Taking 3rd place at the World Giant Salad Championship, the Italian Alberto Tomba caused a small scandal. The prize vase thrown by the Olympic champion hit the photo correspondent Alde Marcinuzzo. According to Tomba, he was the one who had printed the photo of the naked athlete in one of the magazines last summer. Maria Lemieux against Eric Lindros. Supermatch Sunday, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. This time the Flyers skipped around the Penguins in the 3rd period with a score of 4-5. First, Eric Desjardins evens the score, and Ron Brettemore takes Philadelphia ahead. That was the overview of the sports news on Channel 1. Soccer long ago has conquered the hearts of millions on the fields of Spain. Sport number 1 is already being tasted by our 4-legged lesser brothers, as is evidenced by our clip of the day. Goodbye.